Our story begins one time an immense herd of buffalo, possibly 10,000, came straight for the camp. The pioneers sent men out to fire at them and turn them in the opposite direction to avoid a stampede of their own cattle. One such stampede did occur in which a little girl was killed. There was also danger from wild beasts. Young Harrison went back one day to get a cow that was left behind because of lameness. Returning, he saw a mountain lion by the roadside. He had only a stick in his hand, so he whipped the cow to its utmost speed and kept an eye on the lion. After he passed, it ran into the road and looked at him, waving its tail uncertainly, but finally it concluded to go off into the brush. The Saints got comfortably and sociably through that first winter. Then the grasshopper plague, when their resources were almost exhausted, threatened them with actual death from starvation. They were living on sago and thistle roots and game. Thistle roots were gathered by the river and were a foot long in many instances, and tender. Can't find them like that now, says Brother Sperry's journal. The Lord put them there for his people. The lad once wounded a sandhill crane, which he chased for 1.5 miles when it turned and prepared to fight. It raised its head and was as tall as Harrison. It and the boy danced around each other until after a terrific struggle he conquered the bird and, putting its legs over his shoulders, trudged home, looking himself like a huge bunch of feathers. In 1849, it was deemed safe to send the cattle out to graze. Harrison Sperry, with his brother and brother-in-law, took the herd near Big Cottonwood Canyon. One evening, as Harrison was preparing supper, he heard the cap of a gun snap and saw an Indian about 5 rods away with a gun leveled at him. He stopped to throw a bucket of water on the fire, then crept into the bush shanty, where the 3 men lay with guns in their hand most of the night. They heard not so much as the crackling of a twig, but in the morning discovered that the Indians had fled, driving with them the entire herd belonging to the Saints. Harrison ran back to the city and gave the alarm. Soon men were in hot pursuit. At Battle Creek Canyon, now Pleasant Grove, they found that the Indians just ready for a feast on one of the heifers. There followed the first battle with the red men in Utah. It lasted 9 or 10 days, the men then returning with all the stock recovered except the roasted heifer. In 1853, this young man was a spectator when Brigham Young laid the cornerstone of the Salt Lake Temple. Again, 40 years later, he was a witness when President Woodruff pressed a button and the capstone was lowered and the temple completed. When President Young learned of the pitiful plight of the handcart people, he was greatly perturbed. He immediately planned a relief expedition and sent a messenger to Brother Sperry, requesting him to ride ahead with a companion to carry words of cheer to the sufferers. Horses were provided. Harrison hastily got together some lunch and started with his friend at 2 o'clock in the morning on a record-breaking endurance ride. They changed animals at stations along the way, and heedless of food and rest, spurred relentlessly on 2 nights and 2 days over a shortcut known to Harrison. They found the Saints burying 17 of their number who had died of exposure that day. They gave their message of encouragement and helped to chop down the large center pole of a shelter where the travelers had taken refuge. They made a fire of this and waited in some comfort for the approaching aid. In 1887, Brother Sperry was fined $300 and sentenced to 6 months in the penitentiary for living with more than one wife. This term was shortened a month for good behavior. His diary is an invaluable document of that chapter of our church history. It harbors no resentment nor bitterness. It casts rather a halo of gloriousness over the entire proceeding. So firm were these men in their conviction of the righteousness of their conduct that they accepted this type of martyrdom almost with fervor. The journal says of the day of arrival, "Came to Penn in the evening, met a host of friends, had a grand meeting and a good time." The men were kept at police duty in different quarters, they read a great deal, and were always delighted with the opportunity to bathe and shave. Brother Sperry's musical ability was a boon at this trying time. Brother William Foster played the guitar, and the two practiced together often. Other musicians were there also. We had a grand concert in the evening, a long program that would have done credit to a city troupe. In the evening, 15 or 20 of the brethren met and sang some of the songs of Zion that made the old walls fairly ring. One of the last entries of Brother Sperry is, "I lay awake most of the time last night reflecting over our present situation as a people and our condition here in prison, and the Spirit of the Lord rested upon me, and I shed tears of joy. My feeling is, O Lord, thy will be done and not mine."